Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling, most perplexing unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. It's a story about 9 lives, lost in a way that just seems to defy all logical explanation. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident.
I mean, just think about this for a second. This is the central question, the terrifying heart of this whole mystery. What on earth could be so frightening that a group of seasoned hikers would literally cut their way out of their only shelter and run out into a deadly blizzard, many of them without shoes or even proper coats?
So to even begin to piece this puzzle together, you have to know who these people were. So let's take a closer look at this fateful expedition.
Now make no mistake, this was not a group of amateurs. We're talking about sharp university students and a seasoned 38-year-old ski instructor, all led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. Every single one of them was an experienced Grade 2 hiker, and this very trek was meant to earn them their Grade 3 certification, which was the absolute highest you could get in the Soviet Union at the time. These were tough, skilled people who knew exactly what they were doing.
And their goal? Well, it was beyond ambitious, a Category 3 trek to Ural Mountain. And they decided to do it in February, which is, without a doubt, the most brutal and unforgiving time of year in the Ural Mountains. So the stakes were already incredibly high right from the get-go.
But as we know, they never reached their goal. What followed instead was a truly grisly discovery that has captivated the world for decades.
So here's how it all went down. The group was supposed to be back around February 12th. When no message came, there wasn't an immediate panic. Delays happen out there. But by the 20th, their families were frantic and demanded a search. It wasn't until February 26th that the first clue was found, and believe it or not, the last of the bodies weren't discovered until May. This 2-month-long search just built up this incredible sense of dread.
Okay, so the first chilling piece of evidence was found on a mountain called Kolat Syachal, which in the local Mansi language ominously means dead mountain. It was their tent, abandoned and half buried in snow. All their belongings, their food, their warm clothes, their shoes, all left behind. And here's the real kicker. The tent had been sliced open from the inside.
And what they found next was even more disturbing. Following the tracks away from the tent, they saw 9 sets of footprints. Some were just in socks, some were completely barefoot, heading away from camp. About a kilometer away, under a pine tree, they found the first 2 bodies, dressed only in their underwear. 3 more, including Dyatlov himself, were found scattered between that tree and the tent in positions that suggested they were desperately trying to crawl back to safety. But the last 4, well, they weren't found for another 2 months, buried under 13 feet of snow in a nearby ravine.
The entire scene was just utterly baffling. And believe it or not, the official investigation that followed only managed to deepen the mystery.
Okay, this is where the mystery really intensifies. The first 5 bodies they found, the cause of death was officially listed as hypothermia. Pretty straightforward, right? But the last 4, the ones found in the ravine, had suffered absolutely catastrophic internal injuries. We're talking massive chest and skull fractures, but with almost no external wounds.
I mean, get this. The medical examiner, a man named Boris Vozrojdeny, said the force that killed them was comparable to being hit by a car crash. So what in the world could inflict that kind of raw power deep in the wilderness without even breaking the skin?
And the bizarre evidence just kept piling up. Investigators found 0 signs of other people, no hint of a fight. They figured out the hikers died just 6 to 8 hours after their last meal. And then you have these details that just defy all logic. One of the victims, Ludmila Dubinina, was found missing her tongue and her eyes. Some of their clothing had traces of radioactivity on it. And it all comes back to that central, impossible fact. The tent was ripped open from the inside. Why did they flee?
So, after all that, what did the official Soviet investigation come up with in 1959? Well, their official conclusion was that the hikers died from a compelling natural force. That's it. The case was then abruptly closed, and the files were classified and sent to a secret archive, which, of course, just fueled decades and decades of speculation.
Yeah, an answer like that, it doesn't satisfy anyone, right? So for over 60 years, everyone from serious researchers to scientists to conspiracy theorists have all tried to explain the unexplained.
All right, so let's talk theories. The big one, the leading scientific theory today, is something called a slab avalanche.
Basically, this is when a huge plate of snow just slides down the mountain as one cohesive block. And the key thing here is that it can happen on surprisingly low-angle slopes, just like the one where the group decided to make camp.
So, does the avalanche theory hold up? Well, on one hand, it would definitely explain why they'd have to evacuate the tent in such a sudden panic, and it could account for those crushing internal injuries. But, on the other hand, the physical evidence at the site didn't really scream classic avalanche, and critics always point out that hikers as experienced as Dyatlov and his team would never have knowingly camped in a high-risk zone.
But the story doesn't end there. Fast forward to just a few years ago, when a new development suddenly came to light.
In 2021, a team of Swiss scientists created this incredible new computer model, and their findings were fascinating. They suggested that a small, delayed slab avalanche actually could have happened. Now, this was a huge deal. Their model showed how a relatively small slide, maybe one that hikers themselves accidentally triggered when they cut into the slope to pitch their tent, could have struck hours later in the middle of the night. It would have been just powerful enough to cause that panic and inflict those devastating injuries, but not big enough to leave the typical signs of a massive avalanche. It really is the most robust scientific explanation we have to date.
But okay, let's say you're not fully sold on the avalanche theory. Well, you're not alone. There are tons of other ideas out there. Some people point to rare weather events, like a katabatic wind, an unbelievably powerful blast of air rushing down the slope that could have sounded like an airplane and forced them out. Or what about infrasound? The idea that wind hitting the mountain's peak created a low-frequency noise that can literally induce a state of irrational terror. Then, of course, you have the military test theories, suggesting the hikers stumbled on a secret weapons test. That could maybe explain the concussive injuries and why some people reported seeing strange orange spheres in the sky that night. And finally, some of the really strange behavior, like victims being found with so little clothing, could be explained by a tragic medical phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, where people with severe hypothermia feel like they're burning up and start tearing their clothes off.
So where does all this leave us? Is this a tragedy that can be explained by a freak accident of nature, something now perfectly modeled by modern science? Or is it a dark secret, something covered up by a powerful government? That compelling natural force the Soviets cited back in 1959 remains just as mysterious as ever. More than 60 years later, the final terrifying moments of 9 experienced hikers on a place called Dead Mountain are still locked in the ice, a chilling reminder that some mysteries may never, ever be solved.